Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Prodigy Podcast. My name is Tyler Anderson. I will be your host today. It is June 7th, 2024. It's been a little while since we've done an episode, but we are going to be doing a little Dynasty rookie draft review. You can think of it as a mock draft episode if you want, but the only difference is that this draft really happened in real life in my actual Dynasty league that I'm in. So we're going to be going over that in this episode. The intro song in this podcast today is Misty Air by Aquatic Pets. The link will be in the description of wherever you are listening, and you should go follow him on Spotify. Before we get into the draft, I am going to quickly, very quickly go over the news. It's been a few weeks, I think, since I've done an episode, so I'm not going to cover all the news that has occurred since that happened, but mainly I really just want to talk about the big news recently, which has mostly just been contract extensions. I'm a Vikings fan. Skol Vikes. We're going all the way. This is our year. And Justin Jefferson, superstar wide receiver, just signed a 4-year, $140 million contract extension. It includes $110 million guaranteed. I was glad to see this. There were some rumors that maybe he would be traded, but he is the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. And I'm happy that he's going to be on our team for the foreseeable future. Hopefully that JJ to JJ connection works wonders. Speaking of stud players, running back Christian McCaffrey signs a 2-year, $38 million contract extension with the 49ers. And I don't know if I said, but Minnesota Vikings for Justin Jefferson, 49ers for CMC. He's coming off of being the offensive player of the year. I had him in my Dynasty league, and I still do have him. I traded for him when he was kind of dealing with those injury scares, and he's well been worth the trade. I think I gave up like a first and like Jerry Jeudy or something like that years ago, but he was the offensive player of the year last year. Absolutely incredible player. And Christian McCaffrey is getting a little bit older. He's currently 28 years old. Oh my God, his birthday's today, June 7th. We are living in a simulation, ladies and gentlemen. That's crazy. My birthday was June 2nd, so me and Christian McCaffrey, it's close enough. We're basically the same guy. But he is getting a little bit older, and for running backs, especially in Dynasty, which is what we're talking about here, it's always good to get out of running backs, honestly, if you can, like before they get to that age of upper 20s. Once they get through that first contract, things can get a little murky for running backs. I do think Christian McCaffrey is just a different player. I think we still have a few more years of really high quality fantasy production if he can stay on the field. And as long as he's on the field, he's going to be a producer just because of his involvement in the passing game. And he's on arguably the best offense in the NFL. So, Dynasty managers of Christian McCaffrey, this is a great sign that they are locking him up for the not the foreseeable long-term future, but in terms of being a running back, this is good. This is good news for McCaffrey. Wide receiver Nico Collins signed a 3-year, $72.5 million contract extension with the Houston Texans. That's crazy. That's a lot of money. They have wide receiver Tank Dell on the roster as well. He was a rookie last year. Smaller guy, but flashed. And then they did trade for Stephon Diggs, brought him in this year. I'm interested to see what this receiving core looks like, 2-3 years down the road. Stephon Diggs kind of trailed off at the end of last year, and there's reason to believe that he might just be one and done with the Houston Texans, but who knows? If he still has it and the team does re-sign him somehow, it could be a crowded receiving room. They also have Dalton Schultz at tight end, but for this year, things are setting up really nicely for CJ Stroud to have a lot of pass catching weapons and build off of that strong rookie year. And Nico Collins, he's only 25. Last year was his third year. He had 80 receptions for just under 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns in 15 games. So he had a great year. And if you have him on your Dynasty team, this is a good sign. He's paired with CJ Stroud for the foreseeable future here. And, he's not a big name, but he had a big year. So it remains to be seen if it was a flash in the pan or if he really is that good of a player. But the team investing that sort of money in him does kind of speak volumes to what they think about him, and that, hey, he's a good player. We want him here. We want him involved with our young superstar quarterback. And then the final piece of news I'm going to talk about, wide receiver Jaylen Waddle agrees to a 3-year, $84.75 million contract extension with the Miami Dolphins. He is a stud young wide receiver. I had him in Dynasty. I did trade him this offseason, but it's because I was in win now mode, and I ended up getting Tyreek Hill in the trade, so I didn't really want both Dolphins wide receivers. And well, we can actually go over some of those trades later in the episode if we want, but long story short, Jaylen Waddle is one of the top Dynasty assets at the wide receiver position. Just when you combine his talent, what he's done, his age, and the offense that he's tied to, this is a great sign for his long-term outlook in Dynasty. Tyreek Hill is still there, and as long as that's true, Jaylen Waddle will be the number 2, but this offense can supply production for 2 wide receivers, and when Tyreek Hill does inevitably leave, and if Jaylen Waddle stays on this team in this offensive scheme past, the expiration of his contract extension, and he is the wide receiver 1, he could be a real difference maker, more than he already is for Dynasty. So that's pretty much all I want to talk about for news. Like I said, it's been a while since I've done an episode, so I don't need to go over everything that's happened in the last few weeks here. But I think we're ready to get into the Dynasty rookie draft recap. It's not a mock draft, because this is a real draft that did happen, but for all intents and purposes, this is a mock draft, if you think about it. So we are going to move on to that. Before we do, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe on YouTube or follow wherever you are listening to the podcast. The support is much appreciated. And let's get right into the draft. So this is a 10-team, 1-quarterback league, half PPR as well. Big benches. We got like 30-man benches. We have like a 5-man taxi squad. We expand the rosters to 36 active roster spots during the offseason. Then we cut it down to 30. 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 3 wide receiver, 2 flex, 1 tight end. And then we do have a defense as well. In hindsight, I wish we didn't have that defense. But unfortunately, as you can see, I'm clicking this button right here and it says draft board. No draft board is available for this draft. And if you do want to follow along, there is video of what I'm looking at on YouTube, the Fantasy Football Prodigy on YouTube. But if you're listening, I will do my best to convey what I'm looking at with my words. Orally, pause. But yeah, it won't let me show a nice little draft board for some reason on Flea Flicker. I feel like sometimes it does, but I'm just going to go pick by pick, and I don't know, maybe after recording this, I'll like try to cover up the ensuing picks so it's not spoiled, but we're going to get started here with the first overall pick in this 10-team draft, half PPR. No surprise, wide receiver Marvin Harrison of the Arizona Cardinals, generational wide receiver prospect, pretty much the consensus 1-1 in every draft. I mean, in the Superflex League, Caleb Williams, Jaden McDaniels would probably go before him, but in terms of skill position players, he's the clear 1-1. And, in Dynasty, there's nothing more valuable than a young stud wide receiver because their shelf life is so long, and running backs, they just don't have as long of careers. And if you're not in a super flex, quarterbacks aren't as important. If you're in a super flex, again, this is not a super flex. I should have mentioned that earlier. This is I did mention that. God, I'm so smart. 1 quarterback, okay? So Marvin Harrison, 1-1. We don't need to spend too much time on that. That's chalk. Speaking of chalk, Malik Nabers went with the 2nd overall pick, wide receiver of the New York Giants. In a lot of drafts, he would be the number 1 wide receiver, but Marvin Harrison is a thing this year, so he's the number 2, but still a fantastic pick for a team that needs some wide receiver help. And honestly, even if you don't, it's not a bad idea to take Nabers at the 2nd spot, just because best player available, talent, longevity. And, a lot of people might not like the landing spot for Nabers, but I think Daniel Jones is good enough to get him the ball, and there's really no competition for targets. So long term, we don't know the quarterback situation if Danny Dimes is the guy, but I think this could be a worse landing spot. 3rd overall, we got Rome Odunze, wide receiver for the Chicago Bears. Not a bad pick at all. I think this is probably the consensus 3rd overall pick, I would say. And I'm actually going to pull up some ADP here just so I can Dynasty rookie draft position ADP. So yeah, Odunze is, I'm using Fantasy Pros consensus ADP. And yeah, it looks like Odunze is the third overall pick in terms of average ADP. So that makes sense. He's with the Bears. Rookie year might be a little slow. They did draft Caleb Williams as well. So obviously if he pans out and is a good player, that's going to help the offense. But for this year, they have DJ Moore. They just traded for Keenan Allen. He's probably going to be the wide receiver 3 this year, but long term, we're playing Dynasty here. I think that's a good pick. 4th overall, we got Xavier Worthy. This is where the ADP can kind of go a bunch of different ways. Brock Bowers is not a bad pick there, but you know, Brian Thomas, Trey Benson, Jonathan Brooks. But honestly, I think you're going to see a lot of Xavier Worthy and Brock Bowers in that 4 spot. And that's who went number 4, is Xavier Worthy for the Kansas City Chiefs. I've given my thoughts on a lot of these players in past episodes, but just a quick recap of kind of what I think about some of these guys. Xavier Worthy, a lot of people might be scarred from some past wide receiver busts for the Chiefs. You know, McCole Hardman was drafted to replace Tyreek Hill, but that was a reach, and that just wasn't, he wasn't as good of a prospect as Worthy. Who else am I thinking of? Who's that guy that is still on their team? I think they drafted him out of that small Sky Moore. Is that his name? Sky Moore. He was drafted. He was supposed to be a thing, but he was from a small school, not as good of a prospect as Xavier Worthy. So Worthy has electric speed. I believe he broke the combine record, did he not? I believe he broke the combine record, fastest ever. 4.21, Xavier Worthy. Wow. He's a speedster, but he's also a good wide receiver prospect. And Hollywood Brown, they did bring it in the offseason. Travis Kelce is still there, and Rashee Rice is on the roster, although he will likely be suspended. But long term, would not surprise me to see Xavier Worthy be the wide receiver 1 for Patrick Mahomes. Rashee Rice flashed as a rookie, but he does have that legal issue going on with the car incident. And he was more of a guy that they manufactured touches for, where Xavier Worthy might be more of a true wide receiver, like getting separation, but both are valuable for fantasy. But when you're tied to Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, that's very exciting. Moving on, we got Brock Bowers, tight end of the Las Vegas Raiders. A little bit of a surprising pick, but they do go tight end a year after drafting Michael Mayer early in the rookie draft last year. But I think this is an underrated landing spot. Devontae Adams is the clear alpha wide receiver 1, but he's getting older. Jacoby Myers is there as the 2. And again, they do have Michael Mayer as well. I'm interested to see how they use these 2 tight ends. We might see Bowers be more of a slot wide receiver than a true tight end. Maybe he just completely overtakes Michael Mayer as the tight end. Maybe we see a lot of 2 tight end sets. I'm not sure, but I think talent wins out. Might be a little crowded of a receiving core in his rookie year, especially with Devontae Adams there, but I think before you know it, he could very well be their wide receiver 1, their number 1 target, if you just look, a few years down the road. And he is one of the best tight end prospects in a long time. So I'm very excited for him. And yeah, landing spot could have been better, but I think it could have been worse too. 1-6, we got Brian Thomas, wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jaguars. No surprising picks yet. Out of LSU, he's a very athletic prospect, but he goes to Jacksonville, and he's going to be paired with Trevor Lawrence. He's going to be trying to replace Calvin Ridley. I keep forgetting names. Like I feel like every time I try to say a name in my mind, I'm like panicking. Like, what's his name? But Calvin Ridley leaves Jacksonville. There's some vacated targets there, a lot of opportunity. They did bring in Gabe Davis as well. There's a name I remembered. But yeah, he'll have opportunity. He's a good athlete out of LSU. A lot of good wide receivers come out of LSU. So we'll see how he plays, but I think that's a good pick there at 1-6. A pick that I absolutely love at the running back position was next at 1-7, and that's Trey Benson, drafted by the Arizona Cardinals. I love this landing spot. He was a really, really high-end prospect. And to me, this is a great landing spot for Trey Benson. James Conner is still on the depth chart. and he might hold them off for this year, but after this year, I expect Connor to be gone and this to be Trey Benson's backfield. And another reason why I like this pick, other than Trey Benson being a great prospect, this potentially being his backfield as soon as next year, and him just being a talented player, is James Conner. It's impossible for him to play a full season, to play all 17 games. So if and when Connor misses games, Trey Benson is going to step in and be an immediate starter on what projects to be... I just burped into the mic. That's disgusting. On what projects to be a good offense. So, yeah. I mean, I like the pick. I think like this landing spot is underrated. He was taken 66th overall in the NFL draft, so the draft capital is there. And yeah, I got so excited that I'm belching apparently. So I really like that pick at 1-7. I really do. It would be, I mean, I would be almost tempted to take him over Brian Thomas if I had the 6th pick. Just, I know young wide receivers in Dynasty are so important, but man, I just really have a thing for Trey Benson in that landing spot. Jonathon Brooks, another running back off the board with the next pick. This is a guy who is another great prospect, but in a pretty bad landing spot. But I think long-term he will be the guy. They still have Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders on the depth chart, but their running game struggled last year. They took Brooks 46th overall, and I think they brought him in to be the clear lead back. It'll probably be a bit of a committee this year, especially with him being a rookie, but I think long-term he will be the guy. One thing that remains to be seen is, can Bryce Young run this offense somewhat well? Like if the offense is terrible, it's going to be hard for Jonathon Brooks in a committee to do much his rookie year. But, you know, if they can get the offense figured out, obviously, you know, better offense helps running backs. So it's a bit sketchy, but you know, you can't just look at players for the next year or even 2 years. You got to look down the road. Like eventually talent usually wins out. He's a talented player, and usually if you're a talented player, you'll get on the field and you'll make plays. We're going to move on to the next pick with the 9th overall pick, the first quarterback off the board in this one quarterback league. Caleb Williams, Chicago, just drafted first overall by Chicago out of USC. I think this is a fair spot to take him. He's a really, really great quarterback prospect. One of the better prospects we've seen in a while. And yeah, I think even in a one quarterback league, drafting him in the first round is not crazy. A lot of people say that he is arguably in the best position a number one pick has ever been in terms of, you know, the team that he's being drafted to. And this offense projects to be really good. Even with him as a rookie, they have a solid defense. So I think this is a great pick. He's got targets, and yeah, he should be a usable quarterback for, if his career pans out, 15 plus years. Not a huge runner, which is kind of limits his upside, but just with his talent and those weapons, I like the pick. And then Keon Coleman, wide receiver of the Buffalo Bills, taken 10th overall with the last pick in the first round. The reason he is being drafted in the first round here, a lot of it has to do with the landing spot, which makes sense. He is in a great offense with Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. They lost Stephon Diggs. They lost Gabe Davis. So there's a lot of vacated targets. They did bring in Curtis Samuel. Dalton Kincaid is still there at tight end. And they have just a mishmash of random kind of depth wide receivers. So he'll have the opportunity, and it just remains to be seen what he can do with it. I feel like his ADP got driven up a little bit because of the landing spot, which always happens after the draft. But he has the chance to do something pretty special. So I don't hate the pick at all. And if it pans out, it's a high upside pick, because on this offense, that could translate to fantasy goodness. I love the opportunity for Keon Coleman, but one thing that I've kind of seen a lot of people saying about him is he struggles a little bit against press coverage, and his footwork isn't necessarily the greatest, and he doesn't have a lot of true foot speed to get downfield. So it's going to be interesting to see how he's used, because he might be better as a slot receiver, but given the people on the roster, like Curtis Samuel, he's probably going to play in the slot. So Coleman might be asked to do some things that he didn't necessarily show well in college, just in terms of getting separation. So again, it's a little bit weird of a spot, but I love the offense and the vacated targets and the draft capital. But he's good at, he's a big bodied receiver. So I don't know how they're going to use him, but I trust that hopefully that offense will find a way to make it work. But we're going to move on to the second round now, where with the first pick in the second round, McConkey, wide receiver of the LA Chargers, goes off the board. Another guy who has great opportunity with a ton of vacated targets for the Chargers. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are gone. Justin Herbert is still there as the QB, and they bring in Harbaugh and Greg Roman to be the coaching staff and offensive coordinator. They want to run the ball, but it's the modern NFL. They're still going to have to throw the ball to some extent, and McConkey has an opportunity to soak up a lot of targets. Probably a little bit limited upside with the lack of like high-end passing volume that we expect to see from this team, and just the fact that he doesn't profile as a guy he's probably more of like a slot guy, someone who isn't going to make a ton of like big plays, get a ton of touchdowns, but he could be targeted quite a bit, and especially in PPR leagues, as soon as his rookie year, he's going to have an opportunity to flash. So I think he's a solid pick here in the second round. Moving on, we got Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver for the Indianapolis Colts, taken with the second pick in the second round. This is an interesting pick because, Anthony Richardson at quarterback in his rookie year last year, he only played a few games, but he did flash a little bit at times when he wasn't injured. But Michael Pittman is still on this team as the wide receiver 1. So, and Josh Downs is also there. He flashed a little bit last year. So it might be one of those situations where he doesn't have the potential to be that wide receiver 1. But he might be a really good player at the wide receiver 2 spot on a potentially good offense. It's similar to sort of how Jordan Addison is a good prospect, had a good rookie year, but he's sort of stuck behind Justin Jefferson. Now, I think Jefferson is a much better player than Michael Pittman. And it would not shock me, if Adonai Mitchell if he turns out to be this great player, maybe he becomes the more valuable target for the Colts, and Pittman kind of stays in that short area PPR role, So, but we know Pittman is established and he's a great player, so he's got some competition there. But at this spot in the draft, I don't hate it at all. It's not like it might have been a little reach. There might be a few people I would rather have, but I think this is actually pretty appropriate. So next up, we got Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver of the San Francisco 49ers. I really like this pick because a lot of managers are short-sighted and they look at what can you do for me now, but especially for a young receiver, just think about it. He's drafted by the 49ers, 31st pick in the first round. So he has the draft capital. He made some crazy plays in college. And there's been rumors of either Ayuk or Deebo Samuel being traded. Their star tight end, George Kittle, is getting older. And even if one of those receivers isn't traded this year, within the next 2-3 years, they're going to try to get this first round pick on the field. And he'll probably be a starter. And in this offense that scores a lot with just in this offensive scheme, I just think that there's a lot of untapped potential, a lot of potential that a lot of people aren't seeing just because the wide receiver core is a little crowded right now. But in a Shanahan offense, if he's drafted this high and he gets on the field, he has the potential to be one of the best players long term in this draft, especially at the wide receiver position where he's going to have a long shelf life. So I really, really love this pick in the second round. And this is also the team that got Trey Benson. So I think this is a fantastic draft so far for this team. Warner 3. Next up, we got Jayden Daniels, quarterback drafted by the Washington Commanders. A lot of people would say you should take him over Caleb Williams. I don't necessarily disagree. I think Caleb Williams is the safer pick just because he's the better prospect overall, but we're playing fantasy football where rushing stats are broken for a quarterback, and Jayden Daniels, he is an absolute cheat code if he pans out. He's going to be a lot like Lamar Jackson. That's pretty much his comp, his pro comp. Obviously, that's, how good a version of Lamar Jackson is he going to be? That remains to be seen. But his dual threat ability is insane. He has crazy running ability. One thing I've heard a lot of people who talk about college prospects say is he takes a lot of big hits in college, or he did. So that's one thing he's going to have to clean up if he wants to stay on the field. But he's got some weapons around him in Washington, and hopefully this is the quarterback that they've been looking for what seems like forever. So he's got a ton of upside here. I really like that pick. Next up, we got Blake Corum, running back for the Rams. This pick just doesn't excite me. And looking down the list, there's a few players that I would rather have. He's drafted to a good offense, but Kyren Williams is already there. And last year he was absolutely electric. Now, Kyren Williams didn't have a ton of draft capital invested in him, but after what he showed, I really don't think Blake Corum is going to come in here and usurp him as the starter. Is that how you say that? Usurp? Is that the word? But he was taken 83rd overall. So pretty good draft capital. And I don't know if it's going to be a committee or if he's just going to be the true backup, because Kyren did miss some games. But so if Corum gets on the field as a starter, obviously he's going to be great in this offense. And he scored a lot of touchdowns at Michigan. And he's not like a big play guy, but he'll get you what's there, and he can get in the end zone. But I feel like he's going to need some things to break his way to really pan out for fantasy. So TBD, but in terms of ADP, this might be a little early for him. This Fantasy Pros ADP listing has him at 18th, and he was taken 15th, so not too far off. But this next pick, Jermaine Burton, I would have much rather taken him. Wide receiver taken by the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are there right now, but sort of like with Ricky Pearsall, just look a little bit past your nose. As soon as this year, he could be the wide receiver 3, and next year, T. Higgins is going to be gone. It's almost a foregone conclusion. And if he's the player that they drafted him to be, he is going to be their wide receiver 2. He was taken 80th overall, and he fell in the draft a little bit just because of some character issues or whatever. But ADP has him on this website listed as 23, and he was taken at 16. I feel like this website is wrong. I would love to have Jermaine Burton. I think this was a great pick. I would have taken him before Blake Corum. Jayden Daniels, it's tough just because it's a one quarterback league. But if you really needed a quarterback, maybe you could take Jayden Daniels. But I think Jermaine Burton, I think he's got he's got a lot of potential with Joe Burrow and once Higgins is gone. So moving on, Ben Sinnott, tight end for Washington. Another good pick by Warner 3 here. He is not Brock Bowers, but he is a good tight end prospect, and I actually think this is a good pick. A lot of people who know a lot about college players really like this prospect. He was taken 53rd overall by Washington. They still have Zach Ertz on the roster, but rookie tight ends usually don't produce as it is, so he'll sit behind Ertz. Ertz will do his thing where he catches his little dump offs, and then he'll probably retire or get hurt or move on. And then Sinnott will likely be the starter within the next couple years. And I think this is a good pick. I think this is a really good spot for him. There's a few, there's a player we're going to talk about in a little bit. I probably would have taken over him, but if you want a tight end, that's a good pick. So next up, we got JJ McCarthy, quarterback of the Vikings. And I don't know how to feel about this because I am a Vikings fan, and I think JJ McCarthy has a shot to be a good player. This is a great spot. Caleb Williams has a good landing spot, but this spot is really good as well. Maybe just as good in terms of offensive weapons. You got TJ Hawkinson at tight end, Justin Jefferson at wide receiver, Jordan Addison at wide receiver 2. You got an offensive-minded coach with Kevin O'Connell. And he's not a big runner. So, again, upside might be a little limited, but to go 4 picks after Jayden Daniels, who has that crazy upside, this might be a little early, but you just never know with quarterbacks. And my league is a lot of Vikings fans, so this does make sense. And I in this offense, it very well could work out. So it just remains to be seen. At Michigan, he wasn't asked to do that much. So I think a lot of people are already putting this label on him as game manager, not going to have a lot of big games, not throw for a lot of yards. You know, he's not going to have a lot of 3 touchdown games, but you just don't know. Like, he wasn't asked to do a lot. If he's asked to take on a role like that in some games, maybe he can do it. You know, he's got a good situation around him, so he's got some big shoes to fill replacing Kirk Cousins there, but hopefully he can do it for my sanity. Moving on, Xavier Legette, wide receiver for the Panthers. Very interesting prospect. This is the guy that I said I might take over Sinnott. I mean, it just depends what position you need, but Legette has a lot of potential because his last year in college, he was crazy good, but if he has a lot of red flags where he had a 5th year breakout, which is a bad sign. And he literally did nothing before his final season. Like, literally no statistical relevance of any kind. He's a freak athlete with insane speed. And I've heard some people say, like, you know, maybe he just, in his 5th year, being such a freak athlete, like, he was just beating up on, like, kids, you know, like, he's older, he's a big freak athlete. So in the NFL, that's not going to be a thing. He's going to have to be more refined, but they did trade up to get him. They already have Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson, and Jonathan Mingo. But I think the ideal hope for the Panthers is that he would overtake Jonathan Mingo, who left a lot to be desired last year. And then if Adam Thielen, you know, retires after this year or next year or whatever, they would want him to be their lead alpha outside wide receiver 1. So again, it comes down to Bryce Young. Just like I said with Jonathan Brooks, they need him to show up. So I'm a little sketched out by him. I think there's a really good chance that he busts, but if he hits, you know, he could be a really big difference maker. And at this spot of the draft, like, you'll see as we go down the next the list of names, I think this is a really good spot for him. Even though he does have those red flags, I think this is a good spot to take a chance on him. And then the final pick in the 2nd round is Drake Maye, quarterback of the Patriots. This team needed a quarterback. He has Dak Prescott, but behind him he has Stafford and I think Jimmy Garoppolo. So he needed like another body just, you know, behind Dak Prescott. And, you know, he is a kind of developmental prospect. And again, you just never know how quarterbacks are going to work out. Patriots have a lot of like mid-tier wide receiver talent. And they did draft Jaylen Polk as well in the rookie draft high. So I expect Jacoby Brissett to be the starter, but eventually he will get his chance. And, you know, he's taken very high in the draft. So he'll get his chance to do his thing. And if he pans out, he'll be a nice little streamable quarterback. I mean, who knows? Maybe he'll be the next Justin Herbert. I know a lot of people weren't excited about Herbert. He turned out to be electric. So just time will tell, but I don't love the situation, but if he's a good quarterback, like I said, talent will win out and he'll probably be good for fantasy. We are now in the 3rd round of this 4-round rookie draft. I'm going to kind of speed through these a little faster now that we're later in the draft. But we're going to start with the first pick in the 3rd round. We got Jatavian Sanders, tight end for the Carolina Panthers. He was selected 101 overall. And, you know, tight end is weird. Rookies often don't produce. I think this was a little bit of a reach, but they needed help at tight end. So kind of like I said with Legette and with Brooks, it's going to come down to the offense and the development of the player. So it remains to be seen what he, you know, how impactful he will be long term. So he might have a chance for an immediate role on this offense just because of lack of tight end production there, but they have all those wide receivers, so I expect it to be a slow start for Sanders if he ever gets it going. Wide receiver Troy Franklin of the Denver Broncos, taken with the second pick in the third round, and he fell in the draft. A lot of people were excited for him, and he fell in the NFL draft, and that doesn't bode well for his outlook just because of like what teams think about him. I mean, he's such a weird player. For reference, Jatavian Sanders ADP on this website is 32. He was taken 21st, and then Troy Franklin, his ADP is 24, and he was taken 22nd. So that's a little more in line with what you would expect, and I think this is a good spot to take him. But the fact that he fell in the draft does raise some red flags. He was taken 102 overall, but Courtland Sutton is there. I don't think Courtland Sutton is there for the long term. So I think he'll have his opportunities. They also have Josh Reynolds to go with Courtland Sutton and Marvin Mims. But yeah, the depth chart isn't strong, and they did draft Bo Nix at quarterback. So if he pans out, like, that'll help as well. So he'll have the opportunity, but the fact he fell in the draft is concerning. But I still think this is a good spot to take him. Like, that red flag of him falling in the draft is baked into this draft position of the third round. Another nice third round steal, in my opinion, is Jaylen Polk for the Patriots. I mentioned him earlier. Taken by the New England Patriots, 37th overall. He's kind of being overlooked just because the Patriots are not a sexy landing spot. But again, he has a draft capital. Drake Maye was drafted high to be the guy. So, like, if they are drafted to be who they were drafted to be, this is going to be a steal. I think a lot of people are scarred by a lot of the Patriots wide receiver misses over the years. And like Mac Jones and that disgusting offense, but it's a little bit of recency bias, and I think you got to kind of look at it as a fresh slate, and this guy has the potential to be a good player. So I think he's a really good pick here. Kind of a steal. Next up, we got Ray Davis with the fourth pick in the third round for the Buffalo Bills. I think this is a nice little pick behind James Cook. The Bills, it seems like they don't want Cook to be the guy. He's going to be the main guy, but they were having Latavius Murray plodding for 3 yards a carry or whatever he did. What was his? Hold on, I don't want to speak down on Latavius Murray. What were his stats? 3.8. I apologize. He had 3.8 yards per carry last year. But it just shows like they want kind of that thunder and lightning approach, and Ray Davis is going to bring the thunder. He's a big boy. He might get some goal line carries, and he's going to be the number 2 behind Cook. But he'll have a role in the committee, and if Cook goes down, Davis will, obviously go up in production. So I like this pick here in the third round. Javon Baker goes next with the fourth pick in the third round. It's kind of hard to be excited about him just because they already have so many veterans on the receiving core, and they drafted Jaylen Polk ahead of him. But they did draft him to come in and hopefully be productive. So this wide receiver room is wide open. I'm not going to act like I know, Javon Baker is going to beat out KJ Osborne, or Juju. Like, I don't know. But if he flashes and is a good player, like, he could be their wide receiver too, assuming that Polk is the one. So it's not a terrible pick, but this is it's pretty on par with ADP. Maybe a little early. His ADP on this website is 29th overall. He went 25th. So if you believe in him, then you believe in him. This pick is phenomenal. Jaylen Wright, running back for the Miami Dolphins. I mean, ADP. And keep in mind, we did this draft a while ago. I don't know if I mentioned that. This draft was done. We did this draft on May 12th. So it was an email draft, and we finished it on May 12th. So since then, opinions have probably changed, but this is an absolute steal. Maybe the best pick in the draft. Jaylen Wright, running back for the Dolphins. His ADP on this Fantasy Pros website is 17th overall, running back 3. To get him in the third round, the 26th overall pick, is crazy value. Again, you have to be able to look past what's right in front of you. Raheem Mostert is still on the roster. Achane had a great rookie year, but they drafted Jaylen Wright for a reason. Raheem Mostert is in his 30s. He had a great year. I just don't foresee him playing more than another year or two, obviously. And he's been injury prone throughout his career. Last year was crazy. He had over 20 touchdowns. It was something to behold, but I just don't think we're going to see like many. He's entering his age 32 season. Most running backs would be well retired by now. And Achane, he flashed crazy upside as a rookie, but he's small, and I don't think he's ever going to be the guy that's going to get 20 carries a game. So once Mostert is gone, and he will be gone within the next couple seasons, pending he's superhuman, Jaylen Wright is going to have an opportunity to be maybe even the starter with Achane. You know, there'll probably be a committee, but on this offense with McDaniels at coach, like the running game will supply enough production for both players to be relevant. So, and if he takes the lead volume role eventually, with Achane being kind of smaller and dealing with injuries his rookie year already, this is a fantastic pick. So, and even this year, if Mostert goes down, Wright will be relevant. So I think that's a great pick. Next up, we got Kimani Vidal. I'm not a big fan of this pick here. I'm not sure. I mean, Jaylen Wright compared to this pick back to back is crazy. I don't love it. He was taken 181st overall by the Chargers. This player was taken by Warner 3, a guy who I said I liked a lot of his picks, but I just don't see a path for this guy to really make an impact. I mean, they have Gus Edwards as the lead back. They signed J.K. Dobbins, and Vidal is probably going to be the third running back. I mean, Dobbins' health will play a big factor if he can come back from injury. I mean, maybe he's there too. I mean, this team, by the way, like we've criticized a lot of his picks in the past, and they somehow pan out. So, you know what? Vidal will probably be the best running back in the league, but just because this guy gets he just makes crazy draft picks and they work. But yeah, I'm not super in love with that pick. Like for reference on this website, Vidal's ADP is 31. He was taken 27th. So I guess it's pretty in line with ADP, but I don't know. I just don't get a lot of hype around him. Next up, we got Braelon Allen for the New York Jets. Running back. Again, like I like this pick more than Vidal because I think Braelon Allen is going to come in and be the 2 behind Pearsall. Almost forgot his name. I'm forgetting a lot of names today. And he was a good prospect in college. So I think this is a fine pick. Again, this is Breece Hall's backfield, but if he goes down, Braelon Allen is a nice handcuff. But it's going to take an injury for him to be relevant. But you know, we've seen Breece Hall miss sometimes, so you know, it might work out. Next up, we got another running back, MarShawn Lloyd for the Green Bay Packers. I love this pick. His ADP right now is 20th overall, and I haven't made a short, like a clip, talking about how much I love MarShawn Lloyd, just because they did bring in Josh Jacobs, but given the way his contract is structured, if Jacobs doesn't play well, he could be gone within the next year or two. And AJ Dillon is resigned, but Aaron Jones is gone. So Lloyd, in terms of opportunity, he might get more opportunity sooner rather than later than you might think. And even as soon as this year, he might be in a committee with Jacobs. I think, you know, he'd have to beat out AJ Dillon, obviously, but I think this is a really good pick. It's a good offense. And yeah, I don't hate this pick whatsoever. I think that's a really, really good pick that could, if things go the right way, he'll be a good pick. I'm trying to look up where he was selected. He was taken 88th overall, so not bad draft capital by any means. And then another fantastic pick here. And you know, I was kind of worried about I waited so long to record this episode. I wonder if we did this draft today, if these picks would have been more in line with current ADP and current hype. But if you're doing drafts, and this is where some of these players are going, like I'm just trying to highlight some of these steals, like Roman Wilson, wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They shipped out Deontay Johnson, and he's gonna come in and potentially be the wide receiver 2 for the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that is so good at drafting wide receivers. He was taken 84th overall. and he's probably going to have a role right away. Like I don't see a world where he's just, unless he's just terrible. Like as soon as this year, I believe he's going to be their wide receiver too. Like if you look at their depth chart, it's George Pickens, obviously. And then after that, it's Roman Wilson, and then Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin III, Quez Watkins, Scotty Miller, Denzel Mims, Marquez Callaway, Des Fitzpatrick. Like today, Roman Wilson is their wide receiver too. Like, I'm sorry, Van Jefferson, the hype is gone. So that's a fantastic pick there with the last pick in the third round, 30th overall. All right, we are going to conclude with the fourth round of the rookie draft here. I'm gonna go a little bit faster here. First pick, we got Bucky Irving, running back for the Bucks. It's kind of ironic, Bucky to the Bucks. Obviously, Rachaad White is the guy there this year. They did re-sign Chase Edmonds, but I don't think Rachaad White is going to be the guy there long term. He has some red flag inefficiencies on the ground, and I think he'll be good for fantasy this year. But Bucky Irving taken 125th overall, could be the backup if he beats out Edmonds. And after, I think Rachaad White will be gone eventually, and once that happens, that'll open up a lot of opportunity. They might just go a complete other direction, but it's appropriate value here in the fourth round. Next up, we got Luke McCaffrey for the Washington Commanders. He was taken 100th overall. This is a pretty fair spot for him. He projects to be their third wide receiver, kind of a slot guy who, if he gets targets, might be a good solid little PPR guy. So I actually really like that pick in the fourth round. I think it's someone who you could flex if he's able to get those targets. Next up, we got Bo Nix, quarterback of the Broncos. He was the last of that sort of run of first-round quarterbacks, but he's paired with Sean Payton, and a lot of the red flags that he showed in college, I feel like Sean Payton's offense can kind of cater to what he did well in college, kind of get the ball out, short area targets, and I think this is a good landing spot for him. A lot of quarterbacks don't work out, so if he's a bust, I won't be surprised. But I think this is a good spot to take a shot on him. And if you're in a Superflex league, a lot of these guys are falling just because of how many quarterbacks went in the first round. So if you can get a first-round quarterback at deflated value in a Superflex, I think you should take the shot. Just because if Bo Nix is even a competent starter, he's going to be worth that draft capital in a Superflex. Next up, we got Malachi Corley with the fourth pick in the fourth round. I really love this pick. I tried to trade up for this guy. I only had one pick in this draft, and it's coming up here like after this one. But his ADP right now is 26th, and he went 34th. So Garrett Wilson is the clear alpha one. They did sign Mike Williams as well in the offseason, but he's getting older, coming off an ACL. Malachi Corley, I think he'll be a short area guy and could be relevant as soon as this year. And hopefully Aaron Rodgers recovers from that Achilles injury and is able to get him the ball. I really like the pick. I wanted him, but I was not able to trade up for him. But I did get a player that I actually really like in terms of value, and that's Michael Penix Jr. Of the Atlanta Falcons. Just a shocking pick after signing Kirk Cousins to that massive deal in the offseason. But I think for fantasy, there is value to be had here. Again, if you can look past what's right in front of you, you might think, oh, he's a backup. Well, if you look at the contract, this team could get out of the Kirk Cousins deal in the next couple of years. And Cousins is also coming off an Achilles injury, just like Aaron Rodgers. So if he's not healthy, if the team goes away from him, Michael Penix might get his shot sooner rather than later. But even if he has to wait, oh well, he'll sit on my taxi squad. Like in the fourth round, he's gonna have his chance eventually. Just he was taken 8th overall, so like he's gonna see the field. And he was a prospect that I thought was very intriguing coming into the draft. So to get him in the fourth round here, even though I have to wait, I think once he does see the field, the wait will be worth it. Drake London is still there. They got Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, so there are weapons for him to throw to. And I was really glad that he fell to me. And if you're in a Superflex and you can get him here, he'll go earlier than here in a Superflex, obviously. But if you can get him late in a Superflex, I think he's worth it, especially if you have a taxi squad. Just let him sit and then see what happens. Next up, we got Brendan Rice of the LA Chargers. This was a little bit of a reach. He's Jerry Rice's son. Not a great prospect, but the wide receiver core there is lacking. So if he exceeds expectations, he might have a role, but If his dad wasn't Jerry Rice, he probably wouldn't have even this much hype. But I'm not trying to say he was like a bad player in college by any means, but just what people are saying, like he wasn't like, oh my God, like we got to get Brandon Rice, kind of like Frank Gore Jr. It's like his dad was really good and he's a good player, but the reality is he isn't like this great prospect. Like he could surprise and be a relevant player, but in terms of scouting and what people who are paid to know these things say, like he's not like that guy, but he could have a role. People surprise all the time. Next up, we got Jalen McMillan, wide receiver for the Bucks. His ADP right now is 34th overall. He was taken 37th, so I guess that was only a slight value, but I like this pick. He could be their wide receiver 3 as soon as this year. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are still there. And who was that? They had another wide receiver that was pretty intriguing. Trey Palmer. I think Trey Palmer will probably be the 3 this year, but Evans is getting older. Godwin seems like he might not be there for the long term. He's also getting into his upper 20s. So McMillan might, have a role at some point. So at this ADP, I really like that pick. Tyrone Tracy, for running back for the New York Giants, went next. I don't love this pick. He was taken 166th overall. Not great draft capital. They did bring in Devin Singletary in the offseason to be the lead back. Taking a look at their depth chart here. Yeah, it's like Singletary at the top, and then they have like Eric Gray and Tracy Jr., Joshua Corbin. So maybe he can compete to be the backup, in which case he'll be a nice handcuff. But we'll see. And then second to last pick, we got Audric Estime, running back for the Broncos. I'm just looking at some news about him. He underwent a knee scope, but he'll be fine. So that was some recent news with him. But this pick intrigues me a little bit more than Tracy, just because I think there is some opportunity here. It's pretty similar. I mean, Javonte Williams is the lead back, but he had a bad year last year coming off that knee injury, so it remains to be seen if he can fully recover. So we'll see. Samaje Perine is on the roster. I heard he might get cut at some point. He's getting older, and he did not have a good year either. They have Jaleel McLaughlin, who flashed and showed more juice than Javonte. So, if Javonte isn't the guy long term, if Perine gets cut, McLaughlin doesn't profile as like a lead back. Like Estime could work his way into some sort of role at some point. So in the 4th round, I'm cool with that pick. And then the last pick, we got Eric All, tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay, I mean, not the worst pick. He's taken 115th overall. And I mean, this year they do have Mike Gesicki for the Cincinnati Bengals. It's just hard to know. He didn't have a ton of draft capital, and he probably won't turn out. I mean, they have Gesicki, Drew Sample, and Tanner Hudson on the roster, so I don't expect big things, but you never know. So that concludes round 4 and the entirety of the rookie draft. And then I'm going to show you my team after the draft. I only drafted Michael Penix. I did sign some people too, but I made some trades this offseason before and after the draft, so I usually post videos showing, highlighting them. This is a trade I made a while back. I traded a 2026 first round pick, a 2025 4th round pick, Jaylen Waddle and Trey Tucker. I traded those guys away. Waddle, Tucker, 26th first and 25th fourth. In return, I got Tyreek Hill, Alvin Kamara, and Roschon Johnson. Obviously, Waddle is younger than Tyreek Hill, but Tyreek Hill is better. I decided I want to try to win now. I'm like, hey, give me Tyreek. I'll give you Waddle. And then, through it all, the first round pick, Trey Tucker in the 4th, also equated to getting Alvin Kamara and Roschon Johnson. So I was cool with that. And then I also traded with that same team. They were rebuilding. They're getting rid of all of their aging assets, all of their running backs, which is very smart. I gave up a 2026 second and Andre Oshivas for Derrick Henry. I was sad to let go of Oshivas, but as we saw, they drafted Jermaine Burton. So, you can get a little too attached to these sleeper wide receivers, especially those guys who aren't established. So sometimes it's worth trading hype for established talent, Derrick Henry. Then this was before he signed with the Ravens, so I took a little bit of a risk, but he signed with the Ravens. Love that landing spot. And then this is a trade I just made a few days ago. So I feel like I need to justify myself a little bit here. Okay. So I sent this guy 3 trade offers centering around Jalen Hurts because he has CJ Stroud and Jalen Hurts. We're in a 1-quarterback league. I'm like, you know what? CJ Stroud is younger. He projects to be a more long-term player. Jalen Hurts is a little older, and while he might be at his peak right now and be better, he's mobile. He's taking a lot of hits, and kind of like what we saw with like Cam Newton and a lot of mobile guys, once the athleticism is gone and the injuries and the hits mount up, he might kind of lose it. So I sent him like a bunch of offers. I was like, okay, downgrade from Jalen Hurts to Tua. I'll give you, a 2nd-round pick and a 3rd-round pick. I don't have a lot of picks in the near future, so it was a 2027 2nd-round pick and a 2026 3rd-round pick. With Tua, I also threw in Isaiah Davis, just because he also has Braelon Allen. So I'm like, maybe you want the whole backfield. I don't know, but I'll give you those guys for Jalen Hurts, for just Jalen Hurts. Okay. I was like, I sent him another offer. I sent him 3 so we could decide. I was like, okay, or if you also include Christian Kirk on top of Jalen Hurts, I'll still give you Tua. I'll still give you Isaiah Davis. I'll still give you the 2nd and the 3rd. I'll give you a 4th-round pick in 2026 as well, and I'll give you Cortland Sutton. And he didn't want that either. I also sent him another offer, Jalen Hurts and Christian Kirk, where I was like, I'll give you Tua, Davis, Mike Williams, 2026 3rd and 4th, 2027 2nd. So to me, those trades aren't egregious. He counters. Give me Tua, Alvin Kamara, a 3rd and a 4th in 2026 for Jalen Hurts and Drake London. And I'm like, huh? And then he canceled the trade. So I'm like, oh, he must have just sent it on accident. He resends the trade minutes later. Exact same thing, but he also includes Jaylen Warren. So I'm like, and this was on my birthday. So this is the best birthday gift I ever received. I felt bad about it, but I accepted it. And you know what? I've made a lot of bad trades and I feel a lot better about this now. So I ended up giving Tua, Alvin Kamara, a 3rd and a 4th in 2026 for Jalen Hurts, Jaylen Warren, and Drake London. Like, I just don't know what he was thinking. Alvin Kamara could very well be the best player this year, but we're playing Dynasty, and how old is he? He's 28 years old. He'll probably have a couple years of good production left, but Jaylen Warren can not replace his production, but to kind of mask that hole at running back, that's fine when I'm getting Jalen Hurts and Drake London in return. Like, I will downgrade from Kamara to Jaylen Warren to upgrade from Tua to Jalen Hurts and also get just Drake London, who, again, he hasn't done it yet for fantasy, but he has the hype is there. I think the talent is there, and Kirk Cousins is there now, so I think he'll have his best year ever. And again, I sent him offers that I thought were way better, and that's what he wanted, so whatever. So all in all, this is my team. We got Jalen Hurts at quarterback. At running back, we have Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, CMC. I did lose Alvin Kamara, which does hurt, but I just replaced him with Drake London, as a wide receiver flex. I do have Jaylen Warren on the bench right now, but someone who will see starts for me this year. And then at wide receiver, we got Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore, Drake London, Chris Godwin. On the bench, we have DeAndre Hopkins, Cortland Sutton, Mike Williams, Zay Jones and Greg Dortch, Odell Beckham, Chase Claypool, if he can revive his career. I once traded Deebo Samuel straight up for Chase Claypool. So, you know what? I don't feel bad screwing people over in trades anymore because that happened to me. And then at tight end, I got Kyle Pitts, Dallas Goedert, Kobe Parkinson, Daniel Bellinger, Greg Dulcich, Jelani Woods. Got Theo Johnson on the taxi squad. I think that's a nice little pick. If you're drafting like today or in the future, like Theo Johnson with Darren Waller mulling retirement. I think Bellinger will probably be the guy in the short term, but Theo Johnson he's an interesting prospect. Could be worth holding on your taxi squad. We also have Michael Wilson, Jonathan Mingo at wide receiver. So, hey man, this is the team now. I think this is a fantastic squad. I wish I had Kamara still, but I was really worried about having Tua and Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. because, you know, they're not like the most locked in guys in terms of consistency. But now I got Jalen Hurts and Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. So, and I got Michael Penix on the taxi squad. I might trade like a 4th round pick for Stafford or something, just emergency depth. But yeah, this is the squad. Thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys in the next one. Please make sure to drop a like and subscribe or follow wherever you are listening. And good luck in your rookie drafts if you still have them. Even if you had your rookie draft, I think looking at past drafts compared to current ADP, you can maybe identify some trends in terms of values for trades and stuff like that. So thanks again. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.